I'm 32 and still living at home with my parents. To be honest, I never thought I'd be here this long, but life didn't exactly go as planned. After university, I worked a couple of jobs, but nothing that paid well enough to move out comfortably. And then rent prices in my area started to skyrocket. I thought staying home would mean saving up and finding my own place eventually. But here I am, all these years later, watching friends settle down in their own spaces while I'm still in the bedroom I grew up in. It's not that I don't love my parents. They're the best kind of roommates. But as I glance at the photos on my wall, the high school friends I no longer keep in touch with, the faded concert tickets, the dreams I once pinned up like milestones, I can't help but feel a little trapped. Most of my friends have their own homes or at least rent somewhere nice. They have partners, kids, and lives that feel like the pages of a book I can't quite step into. The whole saving up idea feels like a fading fantasy, especially when I get a small financial boost and consider moving out only to feel the familiar panic rise with each glance at my bank account. Then there's him. We met, as people do, by accident and a little bit of fate. He had this way of making me laugh about things I'd forgotten could be funny. One night, as we shared a coffee under flickering streetlights, he asked, "What are you afraid of?" And in a moment of honesty that surprised me, I told him. I told him about the fear of waking up 5, 10 years down the line, still here, still waiting for a break that never comes. His eyes softened, and that's when he leaned in, barely a whisper. "Maybe the break you're waiting for isn't out there. Maybe it's already within you." Those words stayed with me, reverberating in the quiet moments when I thought no one was watching. Life kept unfolding, tangled and complex, as moments of doubt danced with unexpected surges of courage. And just when I thought I figured out how things would go, that's when it all changed. The secrets, the choices, the love that tested everything I thought I knew about myself. A few weeks passed after that night, and life returned to its usual rhythm. I went back to work, trudged through the same routines, and only sometimes remembered his words. I began to wonder if it had all been some fleeting moment that would soon be filed away as a nice memory, a passing interaction with someone who'd never truly understand. But one evening, he showed up at my front door. "I want to show you something," he said, a slight smile playing at the corner of his lips. Curiosity got the better of me, and soon enough, we were driving out of town, the city lights fading behind us. We didn't talk much, just listened to the radio hum softly as the buildings turned to trees, the road narrowing as we entered a part of town I'd never been to before. The air grew colder and sharper as we climbed a winding hill. Eventually, he parked the car near a small clearing, and I followed him out, watching my breath curl in the chilly night air. The stars above were stunning, more vivid and numerous than I'd ever seen them. It felt like stepping into another world, one that didn't operate on the same laws of time and routine that my life was tied to. "I come here to think," he said, sitting down on a bench that faced out over a valley. I joined him and we sat in silence for a while, taking in the view. The city sprawled below, distant and small, while we sat hidden away in this secret corner of the world. "Do you ever wonder," he began, his voice barely more than a whisper, "what your life would look like if you stopped waiting and just went after what you wanted?" I looked at him, feeling something in me shift. It was as if he peeled back a layer I'd been hiding behind, revealing a part of myself I hadn't known was there. "I don't even know what I want," I admitted, my words lingering in the air, vulnerable and uncertain. He turned to me, his eyes catching the faint glow of the moon. "Maybe it's time to find out," he said, and his hand brushed against mine, tentative but warm. Over the following weeks, he became a constant presence in my life. We shared late-night talks, exploring places that had been hidden in plain sight, spaces I'd never ventured into despite living here my whole life. He pushed me, in a gentle but persistent way, to confront the parts of myself I'd been ignoring. Slowly, I found myself shedding layers, letting go of the expectations I'd clung to, the invisible bars that had kept me confined to this life. Then, just as things seemed to be shifting into place, an unexpected event sent everything spiraling. I'd been saving a small nest egg for that elusive move, and finally, I had enough for a modest down payment on a tiny apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a first step towards a life I could finally call my own. I was ready to tell him, to share the excitement and fear that swirled together, a cocktail of emotions that felt both thrilling and terrifying. But that night, he didn't show up. No message, no call, just silence. Days stretched into weeks, and my excitement withered into a gnawing worry. I went to our usual spots, hoping to find him, but it was as if he'd vanished. My heart ached with a hollow kind of emptiness I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. And then one day, a letter arrived. It wasn't from him, but it was about him. A close friend of his had reached out, explaining that he'd been struggling, facing battles I hadn't even known he carried. There had been an accident, a crash on that winding hill road we'd driven so many times. My breath caught in my throat as I read, the words blurring together as tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I felt the ground fall out from under me, Everything I'd started to build, the pieces of myself I'd pieced together, felt suddenly fragile, as if they might shatter under the weight of this loss. But even in the midst of my grief, I remembered his words at that quiet, persistent question. What would your life look like if you stopped waiting? And that's when I realized what he'd given me. A chance to live fully, to love deeply, and to take the leap I'd been so afraid of. His presence lingered, a whisper in the corners of my mind, urging me forward, reminding me that life is meant to be lived, not just waited out. So I packed up my things, moved into that little apartment, and started living the life we dreamed about on those nights under the stars. And every day as I walked those streets, I felt him there, a silent reminder to keep pushing forward, to keep chasing the dreams we both held so close. The moving day arrived sooner than I'd expected. The apartment was small, tucked into an older building that creaked with every footstep, but it was mine. As I unpacked, I found myself lingering over little things, the mismatched plates, the lumpy sofa I'd picked up from a thrift store, and the stack of books I'd never found time to read. Each item felt like a piece of me, fragments of a life I was finally claiming for myself. But that night, as I sat on the floor with a bowl of instant noodles, I felt an unsettling, quiet cell around me. Without him, the silence was louder, the shadows in the corners darker. I reached for my phone, almost out of habit, before remembering that he wouldn't answer. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, willing myself to feel grounded and steady in this new space that felt both exhilarating and lonely. Days turned into weeks, and I began to settle into a routine. I decorated the apartment slowly, letting each piece I added feel like a small victory, a testament to the life I was building. I started a journal, filling its pages with hopes, fears, and memories of our time together. I wanted to remember to hold onto the parts of him that had transformed me, even as I learned to stand on my own. One evening, I decided to visit the hill where we'd shared that first night under the stars. The road was quiet, lined with shadows that stretched and twisted as I walked. When I reached the clearing, the view took my breath away just as it had the first time. The city lights below blinked like distant constellations, and for a moment, I felt him there beside me. As I stood there, a memory surfaced unbidden, a conversation we'd had in that very spot. He told me about his dreams, about a life he envisioned but hadn't yet lived. There was a certain longing in his voice that night, a sense of urgency that I hadn't understood until now. I realized that he too had been waiting, biding his time, hoping for a future he hadn't been sure he'd ever see. And somehow, that understanding gave me a strange sense of comfort, a connection that stretched beyond the limits of time and loss. When I got back to the apartment, I felt lighter, as if I'd left a piece of my grief up on that hill, letting it mingle with the stars. I started reaching out to old friends, reconnecting with people I'd drifted away from. I took on new projects at work, pouring myself into the tasks with a fervor that surprised even me. And in the quiet moments when the apartment grew still, I would whisper a thank you to him for the gift of this life he nudged me toward. Over time, the memories faded from raw ache to a soft, warm presence. The nights grew less lonely, and the days stretched out, filled with possibilities I'd once been too afraid to reach for. I began volunteering at a local community center, something he'd always encouraged me to do. I taught kids to read, shared stories with elderly residents, and found a new kind of fulfillment in those connections. One day, as I walked home, I noticed someone sitting on the bench outside my building. She looked lost, clutching a letter in her hands, eyes red-rimmed and distant. I sat beside her, offering a quiet presence, waiting until she was ready to speak. It turned out she'd lost someone too, a brother who'd been her rock. I listened as she poured out her heart, sharing her grief in halting words. As she spoke, I realized that my own grief had changed, that it had morphed into something I could now use to help others. That night, as I stood in my apartment, I looked around the little space I'd made for myself, filled with the echoes of laughter and tears of dreams realized and dreams deferred. And I felt for the first time a quiet sense of peace. I knew I'd continue on this path, that I'd keep building, keep reaching, and keep loving. Because in the end, that was the greatest gift he'd given me, the courage to live fully, to embrace the journey, and to cherish each fleeting moment as if it were the last. The months that followed brought unexpected challenges, but I felt more alive, more present than I'd ever been. I woke up each morning with a sense of gratitude, knowing that I was finally building a life that felt authentically mine. I found a rhythm. Work, volunteer shifts, evenings spent wandering the city, discovering new places, savoring small moments. One afternoon, I found myself walking past an art gallery with a sign in the window advertising an upcoming exhibit. The featured artist was someone I hadn't heard of, but the piece on display, a painting of a single twisted tree standing alone in a vast empty field, caught my attention. There was something hauntingly beautiful about it, something that echoed the solitude and resilience I'd come to know so well. On a whim, I decided to go to the exhibit. The gallery was small, intimate, filled with art that seemed to tell stories of loss and hope, of longing and resilience. I wandered through the rooms, captivated by the quiet strength that emanated from each piece. And then I saw him. He stood at the far end of the room, studying a painting with a deep, thoughtful expression. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But as he turned, our eyes met and a flood of emotions washed over me. Surprise, relief, a surge of something I hadn't realized I'd been holding on to. "Is it really you?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling with disbelief. He smiled, a little sad, a little hesitant, and in that instant I knew I hadn't imagined it. He was alive here, standing in front of me. We moved to a quiet corner of the gallery, away from the prying eyes of other visitors, and he began to explain. He needed time, he said, to face parts of himself he hadn't wanted me to see. There had been things he kept hidden, burdens he carried alone, and the accident had been a wake-up call. He disappeared not out of neglect, but out of a deep need to rebuild himself, to heal in ways he hadn't been able to before. And now here he was, different yet familiar, like a part of a story I once known by heart. As we talked, the anger and hurt I'd felt faded, replaced by a sense of understanding. I told him about the life I'd been creating, the apartment, the volunteer work, the ways I'd learned to embrace each day. He listened, his gaze soft, a quiet admiration in his eyes that made my heart ache. After that day, we began to see each other again, cautiously at first, like two people relearning each other's rhythms. There were moments of laughter and moments of silence, and through it all, a steady sense of gratitude that we both found our way back, not as we were, but as something stronger, more real. Our love, once defined by a fiery passion and a shared sense of wonder, had deepened, rooted now in something unshakable. We understood each other in ways we hadn't before, not just as lovers, but as two people who had faced their own darkness and come out on the other side. Our time together felt like a gift, a second chance, and I found myself treasuring each moment, savoring each shared breath, knowing how fleeting and precious it all was. And in the quiet hours when we lay side by side, I would tell him about the hill, about how I'd stood there in the darkness and felt his presence, how his memory had become a guiding star, lighting my way back to myself. He'd listen, eyes filled with that same quiet, steady love, and I knew that no matter where life took us, we carry this bond, this shared journey forever. Life continued, and with it came new challenges, new dreams, and a deeper, more enduring happiness than I'd ever known. We moved into a small house together, filling it with laughter and the warmth of shared memories. And every now and then we'd visit the hill, standing under the stars, feeling the vastness of the world around us, knowing that no matter how far we traveled, we'd always have a place to call home in each other. As we settled into our new life, our days became a beautiful blend of routines and unexpected surprises. We embraced a quiet rhythm, enjoying the simple pleasures, morning coffee, walks through the park, evenings curled up with books or old movies. The house we shared was modest but full of character, with creaky floors and an old, charming fireplace that seemed to come alive during the colder months. I loved our little home. It felt like a tangible reminder of the life we built from the pieces of our past. One weekend, we decided to paint the living room. The walls were an uninspiring shade of beige, and we talked for weeks about giving the room a fresh coat of color. After much debate, we settled on a warm, earthy green, a hue that reminded us of the hill where we'd shared so many memories. We spent the entire day laughing, covered in paint, dancing around with rollers and brushes as music filled the air. By the time we finished, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the freshly painted walls. I looked around, taking in the room, and felt a surge of happiness that was both deep and quiet, a contentment I hadn't known I'd been searching for. That night, we sat on the floor with takeout, our backs against the newly painted wall, watching as the evening shadows played across the room. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and familiar, and for a moment, we sat in silence, savoring the fullness of that shared moment. Over the following months, we poured ourselves into our work and found small ways to give back to the community. Together, we organized events at the community center, bringing people together in ways that felt meaningful. I continued my volunteer work, helping the kids with their reading and running art workshops for local residents. He took up a project of his own, working with a team to renovate an abandoned lot into a neighborhood garden. Every time we passed by it, we'd stop to admire the progress, watching as new plants took root, as flowers bloomed in vibrant colors. It became a symbol of our shared efforts, a testament to the life we were cultivating together. One evening, as we strolled through the garden, he turned to me, a quiet smile on his lips. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I paused, letting the question settle. "I do," I replied, my heart warming at the thought. "I think about the life we're building and I feel excited. I'm not scared anymore, not like I used to be." He took my hand, pulling me close, and we stood there, surrounded by the lush greenery, under a sky tinged with the last colors of sunset. "I want you to know," he whispered, "that no matter where life takes us, I'm here. I'll always be here." As the seasons changed, so did we, growing together in ways I hadn't known were possible. We faced challenges, moments that tested us, times when the weight of the world felt heavy on our shoulders. But through it all, we leaned on each other, finding strength in the bond we forged. We became each other's confidants, partners, and closest friends, navigating the ebbs and flows of life with a shared sense of purpose. There were quiet moments when I'd catch him lost in thought, a distant look in his eyes, and I'd wonder what he was thinking about, if he was still haunted by the shadows of his past. But I never pressed, never asked for more than he was ready to give. Instead, I stood beside him, offering my silent support, knowing that some things could only be healed with time. One winter's night, as snow fell softly outside our window, we sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a cozy blanket. I watched the flames dance, the warmth seeping into my bones, and felt a sense of peace that was almost tangible. He turned to me, a mischievous grin lighting up his face, and asked, "How about an adventure?" I raised an eyebrow, curious. "What kind of adventure?" He leaned in, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Let's go somewhere, anywhere. Let's just pack our bags and see where the road takes us." The idea was thrilling, a reminder of the freedom we both yearned for, the wanderlust that had once burned bright in our hearts. Without hesitation, I agreed, and over the next few weeks, we planned our trip, mapping out destinations, booking flights, letting our imaginations run wild with possibilities. As we stood at the airport, ready to board our flight, I looked at him, my heart swelling with a mixture of excitement and gratitude. We were about to embark on a new chapter, a journey that would take us to places we only dreamed of, and I knew that wherever we went, whatever we encountered along the way, we'd face it together. And so, hand in hand, we stepped into the unknown, ready to embrace the adventures that lay ahead, knowing that we found something rare and beautiful, a love that had grown stronger through every trial, a richer life because we'd chosen to live it fully together. Our first stop was a small village nestled in the mountains, far away from the bustling cities we'd known. We rented a tiny cabin with a view of snow-capped peaks, where mornings were marked by the smell of fresh coffee and evenings by the crackling of a wood-burning stove. The air was crisp, clean, and carried the faint scent of pine, a sharp reminder that we'd left behind our familiar world for something wild and new. We spent our days hiking through forests, discovering hidden waterfalls, and marveling at the untouched beauty surrounding us. One afternoon, as we walked along a quiet trail, he pulled out an old camera he'd brought along. "Let's make some memories," he said, snapping pictures of the trees, the mountains, and me laughing under a canopy of autumn leaves. In the evenings, we'd sit by the fireplace, sharing stories of our past, of dreams we'd never spoken aloud, and of the future we could now imagine together. It was in those quiet moments that I felt the depth of our bond, a love that had weathered storms and emerged stronger, rooted in the shared understanding that life was precious, fleeting, and meant to be lived boldly. One morning, as the first light of dawn crept through the window, I woke to find him already up, sitting on the porch with a contemplative look in his eyes. I joined him, wrapping myself in a blanket as I settled beside him. He turned to me, his expression soft and thoughtful. "I want to tell you something," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Being here with you, it feels like a second chance. There were times when I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again. Hopeful, alive, free." I took his hand, squeezing it gently, letting him know I understood. We both carried scars, remnants of past struggles, reminders of the battles we fought to get here. And yet, sitting together on that porch, surrounded by mountains that had stood for centuries, we felt a peace that neither of us had thought possible. As the days turned into weeks, our journey took us to new places. A seaside town where the waves crashed against rugged cliffs, a sprawling desert with endless stretches of sand, a bustling city that came alive with neon lights and the hum of countless lives intersecting. Each stop was a new chapter, filled with laughter, wonder, and the quiet comfort of knowing we were walking this path together. One night, as we watched the stars from a secluded beach, he reached for my hand and said, "Let's make a promise." I looked at him, intrigued. What kind of promise? A promise to keep exploring, to never stop seeking out the beauty in the world and in each other. No matter where life takes us, let's keep finding reasons to fall in love all over again. I smiled, my heart swelling with gratitude. "I promise," I replied, my voice soft but steady, knowing that I meant it with every fiber of my being. Our travels became a tapestry of memories, a collection of moments that we'd carry with us long after we returned home. We met strangers who became friends, discovered hidden gems in unfamiliar cities, and learned to savor the small, quiet joys that often went unnoticed in the rush of everyday life. And through it all, I found myself falling in love with him over and over again, drawn to the kindness in his eyes, the quiet strength that had seen us through the hardest of times, and the unspoken understanding that bound us together, stronger than ever. Eventually, we returned home, our hearts full, our minds brimming with stories we share for years to come. The little house we left behind felt different, warmer, as if it had absorbed the memories of our journey, reflecting back to us the love and laughter we'd shared. As we settled back into our routines, I noticed that we carried ourselves differently, more grounded, more at peace. We'd seen the world together, and in doing so, we'd come to understand not only each other, but also ourselves in ways we hadn't before. One evening, as we stood in our garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he pulled me close and whispered, "This is only the beginning, you know. There are so many more adventures waiting for us." I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my cheek. "I know," I replied, my voice filled with quiet certainty. "And I can't wait to see where he take us." And in that moment, I knew that our love, born from the simplest of beginnings, had grown into something enduring, something that would carry us through the countless tomorrows that lay ahead, always seeking, always finding, and always together. Back at home, life took on a new rhythm. Our travels had transformed us, deepening our appreciation for the life we were creating together. With each passing day, we found ourselves drawn to projects that aligned with the values we discovered during our journey: community, connection, and the simple beauty of shared moments. He dove into his work at the community garden, turning it into a lush, vibrant space where people gathered, sharing stories over the beds of wildflowers and vegetables that thrived under his care. I continued my volunteer work, and we often hosted gatherings, filling our home with friends, laughter, and the hum of conversations that stretched long into the night. One evening, as we cleaned up after a dinner party, he turned to me, a thoughtful look in his eyes. "Do you ever think about what else we could do? Ways we could give back, create something lasting?" I nodded, feeling the familiar spark of inspiration. "I have. I think about how much this community has given us, how it's become such a meaningful part of our lives. I'd love to find ways to help others feel the same sense of belonging." That conversation became the seed of a new project. Together, we decided to create a community center, a place where people could come to learn, connect, and find support. It started small, classes in art, workshops on sustainable gardening, yoga sessions led by a friend of ours. But slowly it grew, attracting people from all walks of life, each adding their own piece to the mosaic of our little community. As we poured ourselves into this new venture, our bond deepened. We were partners in every sense of the word, supporting each other through the challenges, celebrating the successes, and finding strength in the quiet moments of reflection we shared at the end of each day. We worked side by side, turning dreams into reality, and in doing so, we discovered a shared purpose that made each day feel rich with meaning. One day, as we were preparing for a community event, I noticed him watching me with a soft smile. "What is it?" I asked, laughing as I caught his gaze. He shrugged, a playful glint in his eyes. "Just thinking about how lucky I am. I never imagined my life would look like this. So full, so beautiful. And it's because of you." I felt a warmth spread through me, a sense of love and gratitude that was almost overwhelming. "We did this together," I replied, reaching for his hand. "Every step, every decision, we built this life side by side." As the years passed, our community center grew, becoming a beloved gathering place, a hub of creativity, learning, and support. We watched as friendships blossomed, as people found purpose and connection within the walls we'd built. It became a testament to our love, a tangible reminder of the life we'd chosen to create, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. We continued our travels, seeking out new places, filling our hearts with memories that only deepened our appreciation for the life we returned to. And in those quiet moments, standing on a mountaintop or watching the waves crash against the shore, we'd hold each other close, feeling the weight of our shared journey, knowing that we'd always carry a piece of each adventure with us. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sun sink below the horizon, he took my hand, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "Do you remember that promise we made all those years ago?" I nodded, a memory clear in my mind. "To keep exploring, to always find new ways to fall in love with each other and with life." He pulled me close, his voice soft but steady. "I think we've done a good job of that, and I have a feeling there's so much more waiting for us." In that moment, I felt a quiet certainty, a knowledge that no matter where life took us, we face it together side by side. Our love had become a foundation, a source of strength and joy that carried us through every chapter, every adventure, every ordinary day. And as we sat there, the world around us quiet and still, I knew that our story, with all its twists and turns, was just beginning. The journey that would continue to unfold, filled with love, purpose, and the unwavering certainty that we were exactly where we were meant to be. As the years passed, our lives wove to the fabric of the community we had built, becoming cherished members of the small world we had cultivated together. Our love grew deeper, not with grand gestures, but with a quiet strength for shared dreams and simple moments. We faced challenges, unexpected losses, moments of doubt, but each hurdle only strengthened the bond we shared, reminding us of the resilience that had carried us through so much already. Our community center thrived, expanding its reach to neighboring towns. We witnessed transformations daily, people who had once felt adrift finding purpose, strangers becoming friends, and lives intertwined through shared passions. We taught workshops on everything from art to gardening, invited local artisans to showcase their crafts, and built a safe space where people could come as they were, finding acceptance and connection. One day, we received a letter from a woman whose life had been touched by our work. She wrote about how the community center had helped her rediscover herself after a painful divorce, giving her a sense of belonging when she felt most alone. Her words were heartfelt and simple, a reminder of the impact our shared vision had brought to others. As we read the letter together, sitting in the garden we helped create, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. We had not only built a life for ourselves, but had woven a legacy of love, hope, and healing that would continue long after we were gone. Our journey had been filled with memories that felt like dreams, the countless sunsets we watched side by side, the nights spent laughing until our sides ached, the whispered promises that had bound us together across time and distance. We knew that no matter where the road led, our love would be a constant, a guiding light in the dark. One autumn evening, as the trees blazed with colors of gold and crimson, we sat on our porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the world around us settle into the quiet peace of dusk. He turned to me, his eyes soft and full of warmth. "We've lived a beautiful life," he murmured, his voice filled with quiet gratitude. I took his hand, resting my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my cheek. "Yes, we have," I replied, my voice thick with emotion, and I wouldn't trade a single moment of it. As the last light of day faded, we sat together, savoring the silence, the weight of our shared memories, and the gentle certainty that we had lived fully, loved deeply, and left a lasting mark on the world around us. Our story, with all its twists and turns, its laughter and tears, had become a testament to the beauty of a life built on love, resilience, and the quiet, unwavering joy of living in the moment. We knew that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it as we always had, side by side, hand in hand, our hearts entwined, a love that would echo through the lives we had touched, a legacy of hope and connection that would carry on in the hearts of those who came after us. And in that peaceful dusk, as the world grew still around us, we understood that this was the true gift of our journey. A love that transcended time, a life filled with purpose and meaning, and the quiet, abiding knowledge that we had found our way home, not just in each other, but in the world we had built together.